As we head into this end of the secular calendar year, I would like to share with you a sermon that I gave a few years ago during this season. I hope it might help us to consider the cultural milieu in which we find ourselves and to reflect through a Jewish lens about what it means to be a Jew during this non-Jewish holiday season. Our Shabbat inspiration videos will take a break for a couple of weeks and will resume in January. Of course, our shul is still open and we hope to see you in services on Shabbat and our daily minyan. Wishing you a restful couple of weeks. Shabbat Shalom and enjoy. As you may know, the most popular Christmas songs of the 20th century were written by Jews. Winter Wonderland, Silver Bells, Let It Snow, Let It Snow. The song list is quite long. Holly Jolly Christmas, Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree, Do You Hear What I Hear? All written by Jews. And of course, the song that became the best-selling single of all time, White Christmas. Why would Jews write Christmas songs? And what can that teach us about being Jewish during the winter holidays, and more broadly, about our identity as a minority culture? Firstly, it's important to remember that in the early 20th century, popular music in general was dominated by Jews. These were largely immigrants who arrived during the late 19th and early 20th centuries, who were limited in their access to many business opportunities. It was a time when educational institutions had Jewish quotas, but the music and entertainment market was wide open to talent, and Jews succeeded. On a very practical level, these songwriters were focused on writing songs that would become a hit, so it makes sense that rather than write a holiday song for 0.2% of the population celebrating Hanukkah, one would write a Christmas song, which would have a much wider appeal. But something else was going on. The Christmas songs that these Jews wrote were a kind of new Christmas song for a new America. According to a recent CBC documentary, this was a time when the United States was absorbing so many immigrants and was searching for a universal voice and identity, a sense of national unity. The Toronto Star reflected on this documentary, saying it was, quote, a remarkable tale of immigrant outsiders who rejected their parents' European pasts, embraced Tin Pan Alley, Broadway, and Hollywood, and began to write the soundtrack to America's dreams. The Christmas songs these immigrants wrote spoke not of Jesus or the church, but painted pictures of winter wonderlands, of chestnuts roasting on an open fire. These were universal themes. It made Christmas less about religious belief and more about warmth, good cheer, and, most of all, the weather. It was part of the Jewish attempt to assimilate into American culture. A young man arrived from Russia as Israel Balin, became the songwriter Irving Berlin, and broke sales records with a song that used only two images of Christmas: treetops glistening and children listening to sleigh bells. It was Jews who created the secular American Christmas and the new collective American identity. At the end of the book of Breshit, after Joseph reveals his true identity, he helps his father Jacob come to join him in Egypt, along with the entire family, 70 souls altogether. God appears to him saying, Al tira me'erda Mitzrayim, have no fear of descending to Egypt. What was Jacob afraid of? The next part of the verse hints at his fear. God continues, for I shall establish you as a great nation there. The commentator Seforno says that Jacob was afraid of a simple thing, assimilation. He was afraid that his fledgling nation, Bnei Israel, would become integrated into Egyptian culture and essentially disappear. Seforno says that God is telling Jacob, if you stay here in the land of Canaan, your children are going to become mixed in with the other nations of the land. However, in Egypt, they will remain distinct. They'll sustain a different culture, different eating habits, and God says, I shall establish you as a great nation there. They will be a distinct Israelite nation in Egypt. Jacob needs comfort that the national identity of the people of Israel will remain intact, even as they will live within the great civilization of Egypt. A familiar story, a story we've told through many eras of Jewish history. The Jewish fear of assimilation is as old as the Jewish nation itself. Anytime we encounter a host culture, we worry. Will Jews keep Jewish names? Will we keep our traditions? Or will Jews instead start writing Christmas songs and start to universalize their identities? Will they stay Israel, or will they become Irving Berlin? There are two ways to respond to the challenge of the preservation of Jewish identity within surrounding culture. There's the enclavist response and the integrationist response. Jacob and his family clearly become enclavists. They move to Egypt, but they keep to themselves. Joseph understands his father's fear of assimilation. He arranges for them to live in Goshen in their own self-contained community. In fact, he sets them up in Goshen as shepherds, something that ensures they will not mix too much with the Egyptians, who revere as a deity the lamb as well as other animals. Many Jewish communities throughout history have adopted this mindset. In order to survive amidst a foreign culture, to maintain distinct identity, they live in cloistered enclaves. North America is no exception. Think of Williamsburg and New Square in New York, Outremont and Tush closer to home, places where a secular magazine or a website is forbidden as a protection of Jewish peoplehood. When Oprah visited a family with 9 children in Crown Heights, New York, she was shocked and even tickled by the fact that none of them had ever heard of her. The Jewish enclave ensures that the Jewish identity remains strong, but it also pits Jews against larger society. The end of the Egypt story must not be lost on us. The Jews actually did remain distinct, separate from the larger society, so much so that at the beginning of the book of Shemot, a few hundred years later, the new Pharaoh is so threatened by the nation of Israel that he begins to oppress them and enslave them. Of course, becoming integrated does not guarantee our safety. The 1930s Germany can attest to that, but being cloistered, unfortunately, does not ensure our security either. At the end of Breshit, Joseph lives a different model. He is very much integrated into Egyptian culture. He is involved in politics. He is even married to the daughter of Egyptian aristocracy at a time well before intermarriage was a Jewish prohibition. But he does not assimilate his identity. He sustains his connection to his people and his God. How do we know? By what he names his children. Both Manasseh and Ephraim are named in gratitude to God for having overcome hardships. He has sustained his monotheism, even in the midst of a pagan culture. The Midrash points out that Joseph eats separately, for he adheres to dietary customs which differ from those of the Egyptians. The text also records that Pharaoh had given him a different name when he rose to power, Tzofnat Paneach, but the text never stops referring to him by his family's name, Yosef, Joseph. He has brought his individual identity into the surrounding culture without compromising who he is as an Israelite. There is one Christmas character which serves as a kind of model for the successful blended identity, the integration, and that is none other than a reindeer named Rudolph. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer was originally composed as a poem by Robert May, a Jew from New Rochelle, New York. It was his brother-in-law, Johnny Marks, who later set it to music. Robert May says that in writing the poem about the red-nosed reindeer, quote, he drew on memories of his own painfully shy childhood. Rudolph was made fun of for his prominent nose, of all things. All of the others used to laugh and call him names and didn't let him join in their games. He was being bullied for being different. But here's the thing. At the end of the song, Rudolph doesn't get a nose job. He doesn't hide his identity. Rather, he learns that he can be valued for who he is, for what he uniquely can contribute. It is the Jewish North American dream, to be able to be both, to remain proudly Jewish and yet become accepted into wider society. Sadly, the song was written in 1939. Rudolph the outsider was living a fantasy that most of the Jews around the world were not. The biblical Joseph, however, seems to have found that balance. He is fully an Israelite, embracing his family and his monotheism, but he is also a successful Egyptian. The Jewish songwriters of Christmas were not able to find this balance. They believed that in order to be accepted as Jews, they needed to change, to blend in, to find a universal language they could speak together with other Americans. Chanukah wasn't enough. They needed Christmas. They needed a universal Christmas. In the weeks ahead, I hope the weather outside won't get too frightful, though many of our neighbors will be celebrating while we are not. We can support our Christian brothers and sisters as full members of our Canadian culture. And at the same time, we don't need to hide our Jewishness, but rather we should proudly let it show, let it show, let it show. Shabbat Shalom.